Van. Go ahead and turn in your Bibles to the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 9. And here in about 3, 4, 5 weeks, we're going to have, not even that long, about 4 weeks, we're going to have our graduation for the seniors. Remember how we had the graduation, have their pictures in the bulletin? And that's always one of my favorite things. First of all, I like honoring all of them and seeing them grow up here. You know, I've been here 13 years, so the majority of them were about 4 when I moved here. And here they are just growing up on me. But what I like about watching that is a lot of times they will give you where they're going to college and what their plans are for life. And it's funny if you go back 5 years later, 10 years later, and see what everybody's plan is. Because guess what happens? Plans change. They absolutely do. And each one of us, I bet, could go back and say, man, you know, I thought at this age I was going to do this and this and this, and that was going to happen and this is going to happen. And the old saying is, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. Because life hardly ever goes the way we expect it to or the way we think it's going to happen. And so that's such an important thing. All right, let's read the first 6 verses of chapter 9. For I considered all this in my heart, so I could declare it all, that the righteous and the wise in their works are in the hand of God. People know neither love or hatred by anything they see before them. All things come alike at all. One event happens to the righteous and the wicked, to the good, the clean, and the unclean, to him who sacrifices and him who doesn't sacrifice. As is the good, so is the sinner. He who takes the oath, as he who fears an oath. This is an evil in all that is done under the sun, that one thing happens to them all. Truly the hearts of the Son of Man are full of evil, and madness is in their hearts while they live, and after that they go to the dead. But for him who is joined to all the living, there is hope, for a living dog is better than a dead lion. That's a saying right there, isn't it? A living dog is better than a dead lion. For the living know that they will die, but the dead know nothing, and they have no more reward, for the memory of them is forgotten. Also their love, their hatred, their envy have now perished. Nevermore will they have a share in anything done under the sun. All right, that's an exciting passage right there, isn't it? Whew. All right. Now, as you go through it, every one of our lives is in the hand of God. And God's going to do whatever he wants to do. And it's called the double retribution theory when you get into grad school and Bible and such. And it's this idea that we all have. If I am good, and if I follow God, I pray to God, God's going to give me the yes answers, and things are going to turn out just the way I want them to turn out. If I'm bad, I'm not praying to God, I don't have a relationship with God, and things are going to happen very poorly. And that's the double retribution. To the good, good things happen. To the bad, bad things happen. And as a general case, that's how it works. But you look around this world, do you see it work that way? The wrong people get cancer. The wrong people have the car wrecks. The wrong people get laid off at work. And by that, I'm not saying I wish cancer on anybody or that I wish a car wreck happened to anybody. But there's a lot of times when you have a really, really good person and terrible things happen to them. And you think, well, God, I didn't deserve that. Or God, what did I do to deserve this sort of thing? And there's other times people who don't love God, don't act like the way they should at all, and yet for some reason God preserves them. You have the fellow who smokes 3 packs a day his entire life, never gets any form of lung cancer. He just dies in his sleep at the age of 100. Over here you see a person who's never smoked a day in his life, and there he is. He has cancer. And we wonder a lot of times, why does God do that? And that's what Solomon is talking about as we go through here. And our life's in the hand of God, and a lot of times it doesn't make sense. A passage we quote many times, and it's a painful passage if you quote it in the wrong place. Romans 8:28. All things work for the what? Good of those who love the Lord and who are called according to his purpose. All right, so going to verse 2. Whether you're good, wicked, clean, unclean, whether you go to church or don't go to church, what happens to every one of us? Okay, unless the Lord comes back first, we are going to pass away. Now, when you're young, when you're 20, you think that's never going to happen to me. And so you see people who are teenagers, people in their 20s, who drive everywhere, 110 miles an hour, who eat the worst stuff you could ever eat because they don't care about their health, because their metabolism is so great, they always feel wonderful, and they think nothing will ever happen. And then you get to like your 40s and 50s, and suddenly the doctor says, hey, wait, something's happening. And then you get a little bit later in life, and but mortality comes to every one of us. And we don't recognize our mortality, I think, until we get older and we see it start happening. But what does the knowledge of mortality give us? In what way is the knowledge of mortality a gift to us? Or is it? Just don't like dying. But knowing that it comes, it gives you a chance to what? Get ready. And we'll see here in a little bit, knowing that it's coming convinces you to find a way to enjoy life. I may have 5 days left on this earth. I may have 50 years left on this earth. May have more, may have less. But today, God's given me. Don't waste it. Use it for whatever it's been given, which is laid up for you so you can be right. Yeah. Yeah.
I think we have to keep in mind that the lion's considered the king of the jungle.
Right.
But if he's dead, he's equal with the old cur dog.
Yeah, there's no difference. And let's go back to Bible days. Back in the Bible days, they didn't have dogs like we have. I've got a dog. Her name is Maggie, and she follows me everywhere, around the house, around outside, and she gets just the right treats. She has to eat just the right food. Everything is just perfect for her. And so when we read this, a lion and a dog, that's what we're thinking. What Solomon's talking about here is the dog that you read in Luke 16. Remember, there's the rich man and Lazarus is in such torment that the dogs are licking his wounds. Back at this time, they didn't have pet dogs. These are just wild pack dogs which are out there, which are looking for any opportunity to eat you, looking for any opportunity to attack you. And nobody back at this time liked dogs in any way. And so their view of a dog is very different than our dog. A dog for them would be the nastiest creature and the most useless creature ever. And so he says it's better if you're alive, because if you're a dead lion, you're just a piece of meat. You're not doing anything. And so that's an important thing for us to notice. Now, verse 5 and 6 rings funny to us because we are looking at life from this perspective, our perspective. The dead know nothing, okay? In Solomon's mind, in the Old Testament times, that was true. You read through your Old Testaments, and this is a great thing to argue if you're among preachers, because everybody has an opinion. In the Old Testament, there's not a lot of news about heaven. Not a lot of news about resurrection. Not a lot of news about once you die, then there's all this extra stuff. Now, the second half of Daniel leans that way pretty strongly, and there's some areas in the Psalms which kind of give you a glimpse. But in Solomon's mind, you die, you're dead. And that's over. Abraham's blessings, remember the land and the children, were not written to have eternal life. It was the blessings that you receive in heaven as you go on. And so Solomon's speaking from that perspective. A person who is in the grave, they're done living. They are done making any changes that they need to make for the resurrection. They are done with their decisions. Everything is final when a person dies. And that's what Solomon's teaching us there. And so what Solomon is bringing to us, and it's a dark thing, but what he's bringing to us is, he's saying life's hard. There's some times when you're good and bad things still happen. There's some times where you end up being the dog instead of the lion. You end up living a life where you're not the most famous person, where you're not the most loved person, where everything is not great. And he said, but even if life is terrible, it's still life. And whatever life you have, you live it as great as you can. Enjoy this moment that God has given you. Enjoy what you have. Now, what is the temptation we a lot of times have? I end up being miserable. This is not true, but I'm using myself kind of as an illustration here. Say I'm miserable because I look at somebody and, they're wealthier than I am. Or they have children and I don't have children. Or they are the boss at the company and I'm the low person who's about to get laid off. And I can spend my whole life upset about everything in my world that's wrong and be bitter about it and be angry about it and waste the days that God's given. Or I can look at my life and say, man, here I am, it's springtime, there's flowers out there. Here I am, and yes, there's this problem and that problem. Maybe I'm not as healthy as I used to be, but I have life. There are things I get to see, things I get to watch, things I get to read, people I get to know, people I get to talk to, friendships which I can get together. And Solomon says, if you're alive, don't spend your time bitter. Spend your time enjoying what God has given to you. Does that make sense? Is that good? All right. And so those are some important things which we have. Now begin here in verse 7. And he brings this thought a little bit further to fruition. Beginning of verse 7, go eat your bread with joy, drink your wine with a merry heart, for God has already accepted your works. Let your garments be white, and let your head lack no oil. Live joyfully with the wife of your youth, whom you love all the days of your vain life, which he has given you under the sun, all your days of vanity, for that is your portion in life, and that is the labor which you perform under the sun. Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might, for there is no work or device or knowledge or wisdom in the grave to which you are headed. Now, if you read in a commentary, and especially if you read Dawkins or some of these folks who are critics of the Bible, who try to claim that the Bible is not inspired by God, they're going to spend a lot of time here in verses 7 through 9 because it's a quotation of a book that comes out of the area of Babylon over in Iraq. And it's called the Epic of Gilgamesh. You ever heard of the Epic of Gilgamesh? If you study the account of Noah from Genesis 6 through Genesis 10, you're going to see, remember he built an ark, had all the animals come. Epic of Gilgamesh, this dude finds out, his God tells him, he is a demigod, there's mortals and then there's gods, he's half and half, and he creates this big ball, and he brings just the animals he likes and leaves the ones he doesn't, kind of like we wish Noah got rid of the mosquitoes. And he gets in a ball, and God floods the earth, and he spins for a certain amount of time, and then he lands, and then he conquers the world because there's nobody else there. And that is the account that Babylon had of Noah's Ark. And every once in a while, people will say, well, Noah must have copied from him. I doubt it. Noah's account looks a little bit more reasonable than the Epic of Gilgamesh. But another thing about the Epic of Gilgamesh, Epic of Gilgamesh, is it's word for word right here. And some people say, well, wait a second. This is the Epic of Gilgamesh. Solomon is supposed to be inspired by the Holy Spirit, so why would he quote from someone else? Well, what's that showing you about Solomon? He's a reader. And that is something amazing 800 BC. 800 BC, there are maybe 2% of the population world over is literate in any form or fashion. Very few people could write at all. That's why in the New Testament we have a lot of amanuensis. The apostles would hire people to write for them. A lot of them, not many people wrote. But what's neat about Solomon is it's not like he can Google Epic of Gilgamesh, right? He's not going to Google it. And it's not like they have libraries where they're passing books back and forth because they're writing on stone and clay tablets, which are very fragile. But Solomon is so wise and so educated, he is quoting out of people in Egypt. He is quoting books out of Babylon. He quotes a book out of, today we would call it, and I forgot what it is this week. It used to be Yugoslavia. Now it's Bosnia, I think. Every 2 years it changes so they can, I think it's so they can sell more globes, but I don't know. They keep politically changing. But he quotes from all these people in all these different places, which is amazing for Solomon to be able to pull off. And he does quote a little bit from the Sudan area and down in Ethiopia. So Solomon had read just about every book written anywhere in the world. So that shows you the level of education which he was gathering and putting together as you go through here. But this is, to us, it's just trivia. And your Bible and the notes may say something or not, but it's from the Epic of Gilgamesh. But more importantly, he's quoting a passage here which is true. And he's showing his education and showing us also these things which are right. Is there anything wrong with smiling? I hope not. All right. God put you here on this earth to enjoy life. All right. Voltaire, one of the leaders of the French Revolution, 1700s, he said his greatest proof against Christianity is he said, look at anybody in church and it looks like they just chewed on a lemon. He said Christians are the most bitter people. And he said especially the preachers are always angry and they're always bitter. And he said, how can you preach a gospel and say it's good news and always be angry? And he said Christians of all people, if what they believe is really true, ought to be the happiest people anywhere. And what God is saying through Solomon here, enjoy life. If you are bitter, guess how many days there are, or how many hours there are in a day if you're bitter? 24. If you're happy, how many hours are there in a day? 24. But 24 happy hours are a whole lot better than 24 bitter hours. Okay? Yes. Right. The purpose of this life is to prepare for eternity. And when we realize that, it kind of, gives us purpose and reason to live. Yeah. God put you on this earth to enjoy. And the greatest blessing God's given you is family. You got people who are stuck with you, and if they're strange, that means you're not the black sheep. All right? Enjoy the time with those grandkids. Enjoy that time with those kids, because it's never coming back. Enjoy the time with a spouse. Enjoy your family. Enjoy the time that you have. And even when bad things happen in family, enjoy the memories and enjoy the present. That is God. The very first thing God created was not government. The very first thing God created was not church, amazingly. The very first thing God created was family. And he says it's not good to be alone. Enjoy family. And that's what he puts out here. That's what he wants us to know. So enjoy family. That's God's gift to you. Verse 10, enjoy those hobbies. Find a hobby. Find something you enjoy in life and appreciate it. What is it that you like to do? And figure out whatever that is and figure out how you can pull that off. All right, then we close the book. We're going to go 11 to 18 and talk about the randomness of life. How life zigs when we want to zag. How life always seems so different. Let's begin. Let me see on time. Yeah, we're doing good. Let's begin in verse 11. Let's see where I am. All right. I returned and saw under the sun that the race is not to the swift, the battle's not to the strong, bread doesn't go to the wise, or riches to men of understanding, nor favor to men of skill, but time and chance happen to them all. For the man does not know his time. Like fish can be taken in the cruel net, like birds can be caught in the snare, the sons of men are snared in an evil time when it falls upon them suddenly. This wisdom I've seen under the sun, and it seemed great to me. There's a little city with few people in it, and a great king came against it, besieged it, and built great snares around it. Now there was found in it a poor wise man, and he by his wisdom delivered the city, yet nobody remembered the poor man. And I said, wisdom is better than strength. Nevertheless, the poor man's wisdom is despised, and his words are not heard. Words of the wise spoken quietly should be heard rather than the shout of the ruler of fools. Wisdom is better than weapons of war, but one sinner destroys much good. That's some deep stuff there. Life is so random. I used to keep up with the people I graduated in high school, a lot more than I do now. It's been many years. But this may just be true of Permian High School, in the 90s, late 80s, early 90s. A lot of the people who had those 4.0s and had those huge, we did SAT, I think they do ACT here. They went to prestigious colleges and stuff. If you wait to about the age of 30, a lot of those people who seemed like they're going to be so successful, it didn't turn out that well for them. And then you'd see some of these people who were C students, who were not the greatest people in college and in high school, and yet they're very successful in what they do. And there's a lot of times where you line people up and look in the annual, and it'll say this person is voted, most likely to do this and most likely to do that. If you did a recount 10, 20 years later, that recount's going to be very different. And there's a lot of times where you study somebody, where when you look at somebody, it turns out to be very, very different than what you expect. All right, let me tell you a secret. I don't share the secret with people very often. I preached when I was at Freed, I preached with a teacher who taught at Freed. He was head of some department. I don't remember what it was. But we taught together while we were getting our master's degree. And it was I look back at it now and I laugh. About 2 days before I got my first master's degree, it was a Sunday and we're graduating like a Tuesday. He took me aside and he said, Mark, he said, let me tell you, you're going to be looking for a job soon. You need to find a job where you're like an education minister or you're like something like that. He said, because you're never going to make it as a preacher. And I said, you waited until I spent all this money getting this degree to tell me this? And he said, well, I'm just helping you out. He said, but you just don't have the it to be a preacher. You're just missing that one part. And so I moved to a certain city, and as I was in that city, it was near a state park. And that fella and his family would come 3 times a year because they owned a cabin on the lake. And it was a congregation, it was a large congregation. And every time they came, I pointed out that he said I would never be a preacher. And I was a preacher. And I was like, he said but I probably shouldn't have done that. When you're young, you're dumb. But it's funny, looking at somebody at a certain age, you'd think, oh, they're never going to be able to do that. That's never going to work. And then later, what do you know? It worked. Now, I don't say that because my skill or whatever. I just end up being in the right place at the right time sometimes. But we don't know what's going to happen.
Did that make you more driven?
Oh, yeah, I was always, it makes you driven, and I don't know if anger gets you further than it should, Luke and the dark side sometimes. But it's funny, these people you see who you think are going to do so well, it's just amazing. And you talk to any youth minister, they have kids in their youth group they think are going to do great. And then you have kids in the youth group and you're like, I don't know. And a lot of times you just can't pick out which ones are going to be faithful and which ones aren't. God's working in his own way, and it's beyond our thoughts, beyond our ways and what we understand. Life is so random. Now notice this. Proverbs explains how life should go. It's written by a young man. It tells you how it ought to go. Ecclesiastes tells us what happens when what ought to happen hits that sinful and random world. Ecclesiastes is an older man writing and says, hey, this is how it should be, but this is how it ends up sometimes. It's just interesting. All right, verse 13 through 17, wisdom is the principal thing. It gets you a lot further than riches. It gets you a lot further than power. Wisdom is so important. But our society honors wealth, prettiness. I didn't know whether to spell prettiness with a Y or an I, so I put attractiveness. And success above wisdom. But wisdom is what you need, knowing how to handle the situation where you are. But verse 15, here's a man who saves his whole city. And who remembers him? Nobody remembers him. Nobody knows who he is. And I've told you before about Steve Jobs' biography written by Walter Isaacson. Steve Jobs realized he had cancer, went through a lot of non-traditional techniques, and realized he just made a major mistake. And when he realized he's going to die, he hired Walter Isaacson to write his biography. And Walter Isaacson said, I only do really important people, which made Steve Jobs mad. And he said, I only do dead people. But Steve Jobs gave him enough money where Walter Isaacson was like, okay, we'll do this. And he actually says that in the biography. But the reason why Steve Jobs paid him millions of dollars, paying an author millions of dollars, he said, I'm afraid in 10 years, nobody's going to remember who I am. And you talk to younger people, do they know who Steve Jobs is? Some do, but not really very many. But the guy who changed our world with computers, put a phone in every one of our pockets, you don't remember. And I'm not Steve Jobs. Am I going to be remembered? Are you going to be remembered? Legacy isn't shown so much in how we're remembered. Legacy is shown through our family. Legacy is shown in how we enjoy and live our life and give ourselves fully to God. So find joy in your circumstances. Find joy in the life which you're living. One person has a great influence, but one bad person can do what? Mess it up. I oftentimes will talk about us as a church. 350 people. Woohoo, here we are. And 350 folks, if you have one guy who does something really bad and gets in the news, guess what the whole community's opinion of the church is? They think of that one guy. And that's true with businesses, that's true with churches, that's true in so many ways. One bad person has so much more influence, it seems, than what one good person does. But as we work together, good people, as we work together as redeemed people, we still make a change in the world. And we still make a change in society. And that's such an important thing.